All right. All right. So, hello, hello, hello. This is a trial of streaming here. My first time attempting to stream on YouTube. So, we'll see how this goes. If anything's actually happening anywhere. Yeah, I really don't know. In theory, I'm streaming. So, what we're doing today, sorry, I'm just trying to pull some stuff up here. I want to see if I can see myself. Get some sense of whether this is actually broadcasting anything. Yeah, okay, looks like I am live. Let's see what happens when I play this. Cool, 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 cool. All right, so it seems like I'm broadcasting. Cool. All right, now that we got that settled, yeah, so what are we doing here? So I have, and I'm just looking, because I've not done this, I'll probably need, not that I expect anyone to join, but I might want to see, like, if there's a chat or something. Yeah, so there's comments and reactions. That's probably what I'm looking for. All right, so I'm just trying to get some windows up here. Yeah, so what are we doing? We are going to do some planning and design work on a little bit of a pet project that I have. It's a book creation app, or book collecting app. So essentially, one of the things that I enjoy and that I like to collect are books. And there's a particular company. So there's many companies actually that do fine books. Fine books both in the actual terminology of book collecting. So fine books has a certain, it means a certain thing. But also like in a broader sense of nice books, right? So there's several companies. There's one in particular that has been around for a long time. Well, long time, relatively speaking. Maybe not that long, because only like 40 some years, although its heritage goes back a little bit further than that, something more like 100 years, which is still not really a long time. But they specialize in leather-bound volumes, and so it's interesting because they've published something like 100 or 10,000 different works, and there are projects by people out there to attempt to catalog all of those books. And it's difficult, whereas some companies it's real easy to find all the data. This company is very difficult. So there's an ongoing project that I've been paying a little bit of attention to lately. And they've been tracking it in rudimentary ways, their attempts to build a database. In the sort of loosest sense of the word, where it is a collection of data. And I say that a little tongue-in-cheek, but also like I admire the work. But it's not been any sort of formalized software, and so they're attempting now to move it into spreadsheets, which is the logical next step if you have data and you're trying to collect it. You start however you start, and then you move to spreadsheets are often the next place to go, and many times it's the last place to go. But since I build web interfaces for databases as my day job, this is sort of a pet project. I want to just play around with it. I don't know if this will ever come to anything. I don't know if it will even be used by anyone. But it's a project that I'm interested in and I want to play around a little bit with. So that's where we're at. I should probably pull up some documents here. Let's see. Seems like my settings are different. Streaming versus just recording. So a little bit of a learning curve here to just get the things I want on screen. Okay. And I probably should put a focus mode on. All right. So where am I in this project thus far? Effectively nowhere. What you can see is not even backed by anything. Right, so this is where I'm at. Previously, I have done a Rails new. Wow, it's funny, there's like nothing running here. It's been a long time since I've done an entry-level Rails app. So this is just a Rails new, very basic application. This is just a sanity check. The application is running. So we can see, yep, I refreshed and here we are. So we can sort of take a look at what's going on. It's a pretty bare bones, just a couple of opinions here. We're using very recent Rails, very recent Ruby, trying to keep things up to date, up to speed, up to current. So Rails 7.2.1, it's using the asset pipeline gem prop shaft instead of sprockets because that's the latest and greatest. We're using Postgres for our database. And then a lot of this is just standard asset stuff going on here. So Puma for the web server, import map. So I have a lot more experience with ESBuild. There's many options, of course, for getting JavaScript in your application. But this is the one that I'm using, import, because I don't have any experience with it. So I want to see how things go here. Just checking something on the other screen. I wonder if, let me see. Just a moment, please. Yeah, okay. So I'm curious if I'll see that. Okay, good. Sorry, I just wanted to test, make sure that I'm actually getting comments and such. Not that I expect anyone to show up and watch this. This is really just a test video. Honestly, we might not even write any code today. But I want to see, make sure that if I do get something going on, that I'm able to see it. All right, and can I see this elsewhere? I wonder if... So there's definitely a learning curve here. There's no like built-in way for me to see some information. Sorry, I'm just learning my own tools here that I'm not familiar with. Okay. Yep. So sorry about that. Coming back. So I don't really have familiarity with import map, but the simplicity of it appeals to me. And as this is a pet project, I'm going to figure out what that's like. So Turbo, we're just going to use Turbo, Stimulus, and here's another. So just like import map is something I'm not familiar with. I don't really have familiarity with Tailwind CSS. Historically, most things I've built have been using Bootstrap, but I want to see what all the fuss is about with Tailwind and see if I like or dislike it in case I ever want to consider it for anything else. JBuilder Redis, just, boilerplate stuff, boilerplate, blah, 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 blah. So this is kind of interesting. Brakeman is now a default bundled gem. So that's kind of cool. Brakeman is a static analysis, I believe, right? Yeah, well, it says right here, static analysis for security vulnerabilities. Maybe, let's think about this. Maybe I should increase the font a little bit. We'll see how that is. That's probably too small. That might be all right. That's probably what some people are gonna want. I think that's a little too much. Let's try this. We'll see if it's okay. Hopefully that's working. Hopefully that's okay. Opinionated, I'm gonna go with RSpec on this app. Testing is not a strong suit of mine. So this build might go very slowly because I'm going to try and actually do it in a TDD manner. Let's see, anything else here? This is something to Oken. Oken is something I might try to use. You can see it's not even version 1. We may or may not make a go at that. I'm going to move this around. Ooh, that's not what I expected to happen. I know why that is, because swapping things around on my keyboard. All right. So that's like just basic stuff. I think we will separate. So I'm trying to think how I want to lay this out. Just sort of the boilerplate at the top, and then I think we're gonna sort of fill in our custom selection here. We'll go with that and probably play around that way. Okay, so just about everything else is boilerplate. Oh yeah, I skipped over that. So RSpec and also standard for linting purposes. I don't want to think about linting. We're just going to let standard take care of it for us. And then this is to start setting up with Oken, but I don't really know what I'm doing yet. So there's not really anything going on there. We can close those for now. Other than that, this is like, initial commit was just generating the Rails app, and then added some gems and did a little bit of organization of the gem file, cleared out some comments that I don't need, etc. So, and then our only new change so far is I moved that from one place to another. So nothing set up yet, no routes, no resources, no MVC. We can load a page and that is it. Let me pull something else up on the screen here. So this was some preliminary planning of how I want to build this out. So I would like to formalize this in a more appropriate manner. So I may work on converting this mind map, which if you look at it, you can kind of get a sense that this is taking the place of an ERD, an entity relationship diagram. And I'm thinking I may convert this into a proper ERD. That may even be actually what I spend the majority of this stream working on. Because I think it's important. Now, there's sort of a balance that I think you need to have with plan things out appropriately, enough that you kind of know the general direction you're going, but don't worry about perfection. So even with what I have here so far, I know I still have some questions, and I know that not everything is exactly right. So I know that I'm still going to have to make some changes. And some of those changes will be as I convert this to an ERD. And some of the changes will just sort of come out in the code. Because it's very basic. Like, I have the idea of what several of my models will be and how they generally relate to each other, but I don't really have like fleshed out all the fields and everything. There's certainly a lot more that we're gonna do here. But being a book collecting app, right? So Buko, that's a toy name. Probably going to change before I try to share this with anyone else, but Buko. I don't even know. I was thinking like, should I do like 00 BOOKO, Buko, BOOCO, right? Buko, book collecting, right? It's probably not finalized. Honestly, I may even try to convert this to something that could be even more generalized than just books. So right now, the idea is to build it for just a specific printer, publisher, printer. I should figure out what the correct terminology is. Press. It's a press, I guess. So the idea is to build it for a specific press. And if the project persists, I actually work with it long enough, then to convert it into sort of more generalized for some other publishers. So think about it this way, sort of like what the necessity is. It's actually kind of ironic because I mentioned I'm following a group of people who are trying to catalog all the books. And where I found them is on a book tracking application. So a sort of a library-based application. A library thing is what it's called, which has its own set of features. Like it's extreme overlap with what I'm trying to build, which is why this is a pet project and not like, as of right now, this isn't intended to be like a formalized thing. It's not meant, I'm not trying to build something that hundreds of thousands of people will use. If 12 people use it, that's sort of like already more than what my expectations are. My primary expectations is that I will use it, or at least like dabble in some code, even if I don't end up using it. But I probably will use it. Right now, it's meant to be the library, the sort of like list of things. Down the road, it will also be used for storing personal library. So you'll have the list of books that exists, and then you'll also have like the ability to create your own libraries, your own shelves and such. indicate that you own books, that you're planning to own books, etc. But we're targeting that one group of people because even though they're cataloging on a cataloging site, one of the problems with these presses are that they don't often register ISBNs, right? So you own a book. Yes, I have books. I have books all around me, actually. Right. So you own a book, and you've got your, yeah, that's not going to work. Change this setting. All right. So you got your book, right, and you got an ISBN. You know, so you've got like the short number, and you've got the long number, ISBN 13. I think is what it is. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yeah, ISBN 13. Well, I used to work in a bookstore, so I'm just kidding. Of course I know that. And that's helpful for tracking and cataloging, and like it's distinct. You stick an ISBN in to a search, and you know it should be that edition, or maybe not the edition specifically, but like, and this is where the terminology is all very confusing. Like, what is an edition? What is a book? What is a volume? What is a printing? What is a, right? So like, there's a lot of confusing terminology, and trying to track all that is sort of the challenge here. And if we just had ISBN, so for everything, ISBNs, right? So it's redundant. We don't say ISBN number. Many people will, but it's redundant, like ATM machine, you know? I don't know what it is, International Standardization Book Numbers, maybe? I don't know, something like that, right? So if we just had them, it would make the whole project kind of like a lot easier, or in many cases unnecessary, because then they could just be logged and searched and using all the other existing tools out there. But the problem is these presses, these publishers, don't register ISBNs because they don't need to. They're direct to consumer, right? And there may be other reasons, so my understanding of this might not be entirely correct. But they're not selling their books on other sources. They're not listing their books on Amazon. They're not listing their books on Bookshop. They're not listing their books on, you know, thrift books, on Barnes & Noble, on Books A Million, on Waterstones. You know, like they're not selling their books through other stores. They have a website and a catalog and their own channels. And that's where it's being sold through. So there's no incentive for them to pay for a block of ISBNs when they can just use their own internal numbers. And like I said, some of the other presses out there, it's a lot easier because all that information is public. Whereas this one that I'm working on, not only are there not ISBNs, they do have IDs, identifiers, which for the most part are distinct. I've heard, or I think I've heard that in very, very few quantity, they have recycled the identifiers, maybe changed a listing, but I've only heard of it like once or twice. Now, I've also heard that there is a master list available to, I guess, executives or something, but like the general public can't get their hands on that. And it can actually be a little bit frustrating. Like you sort of have to like scrape the website to try and find stuff if it's not like readily listed. It's kind of like the whole company is like cloaked in a mystery. And it's mind-numbing to work with them, to like actually buy from them. For a number of reasons. Least of all is that like their e-commerce channel is hot garbage. Like it's trash. It's it's kind of astonishingly bad for how much business the company does. But that's neither here nor there. It's a big enterprisey piece of software, and I've got my feelings about enterprisey software which are largely negative. So, but the idea here is like, we have all these things and there are identifiers, but there's no international or standardized tracking. So we have to build for that. And then I think my train of thought was like, I'm specifying for that first, the one company, and then maybe for others later. And so I'm thinking like, whether or not I do that, I'm still thinking things through in a way where that allowance is going to be there. So like, this field is obviously not going to be EP ID, but it will be like publisher ID or something. So publisher, and I'm going to be doing slugs, prefixing my slugs with friendly ID, so that the publisher, so this one, EP, Easton Press, FOL, Folio Society, or maybe FS, Folio Society, Franklin Press, FP, maybe, you know, whatever it is, so that their slugs are like this, so that we can do RESTful routing, so that we can have like website /book/EP3061, and that'll take you to it. Not that I think there's overlap in the IDs between the different publishers, but I want the clarity of it this way. So like, that's sort of where we're at, but even still we get into these problems of like, what is a book? You know, what is a book? What is a volume? What is a title? What is a work? What is a series? What is a set of books? You know, thinking about, for instance, you know, how do you catalog something like The Lord of the Rings? The Lord of the Rings is, it's a mythos. It's a collection of works. So like, at the top level, it's sort of a title or a work that consists of several books as a series. But the books themselves can be misleading because, to my understanding, the author J.R.R. Tolkien considers The Lord of the Rings as a single book in 3 volumes. And the 3 volumes that we know it as are The Fellowship of the Ring, The Two Towers, and The Return of the King. So now, if you go to a bookstore and you say, I want The Lord of the Rings, the assumption is either you want the trilogy, you want the quintilogy, I don't know if that's a real word, so the 5 books that include The Hobbit and the Silmarillion. Maybe you want the 4 books, right? So like, in that sense, you say you want The Lord of the Rings, you're probably talking about a couple of books. Maybe the trilogy, which is kind of 1 book, but it's 3 books, right? Because you can go and say like, I want the Fellowship of the Ring, and there's not going to be any lack of clarity over what you're asking. It's a specific printed tome. But this can demonstrate like how dicey the whole thing gets. You know, and one press might publish like 3 different versions of it or 5 different versions of it over the years. So the book, right, in that sense, The Lord of the Rings is not really a book from a database design perspective. The Lord of the Rings is sort of like a work, and a work consists of several books, and those books will have like book titles, and they may have volumes. So like, there are publishers who will print the thing that we know as a book. Forgive me, I don't know George R.R. Martin's work all that well, but the Song of Fire and Ice, which is, I believe, the first book in the Game of Thrones, right? Some publishers will take that, which is pretty well agreed to be a single book, and print it in a spectacular presentation. Actually, here's another example publishes leather-bound editions of Brandon Sanderson's works. So this here, The Way of Kings, this is, for all intents and purposes, a book. You can go and ask for The Way of Kings, and you're going to get The Way of Kings. It's going to start at the first word and end at the last word. And like, that's what you're going to get. In the most cases, you're going to get a single book, a single printed tome, a volume in your hands. That looks kind of like that, but new. Kind of like that, but you're probably going to get it in paperback. Unless you're specifically looking for hardcover, right? But you can see, like, that's not always true. Sometimes, because of paperweight and other factors, font size, and so forth, they might actually publish what we consider a single book in 2 volumes. So from this press here, if you buy The Way of Kings, you're getting a multi-volume work, right? Volume 1 and Volume 2. And that is a single book. So how do we construct our database with those considerations in mind? And those are the decisions that we have to make here. So that's what a lot of this is, and that's why I think the next step is to convert it. So like I said, we don't want to try and be perfect with it. We won't be perfect with it. But if we can at least formalize it enough, we can have the basic idea in mind. And this is like wrestling with these questions about what is what, right? A title is made up of books. Now, many times that title is a single book. What is a good example off the top of my head? I guess this book that I was holding up a minute ago, right? So like, this is a single book. There's not, this is it, front to end. Now it might get reprinted with a new introduction, second edition, and so forth. But this is a single self-contained volume. It's part of a series, but the title of that book is synonymous with the title of the title, right? So the work, the contained expression of these thoughts, the title, happens to have essentially a complete overlap with what the book itself is. So that's a nice, simpler example. And it's going to be a single volume because probably nobody's going to print that as multiple volumes. So in these cases, it's very easy to track. Now, that book's not going to be tracked in this system. That's just a standard off-the-shelf hardcover mass-produced book. But it still has a publisher, it still has an author. People will still collect it. What else do I got? Yeah, okay, that's right. But it does belong to a series. Probably like an author series, because that author has written other books that sort of move in the same universe, the same like fictional companies and fictional characters overlap with each other. So thinking about those things is important. And if we can just sort of wrestle through some of these basic questions and have like a general idea of what to build, it's in the purpose of not having to like start a database and 3 models in realize that everything is wrong and we have to like start fresh. So we have this. I think what I'm going to do next is just work on changing this to be a mermaid diagram. So yeah, I think what I'll do is I'll just make a directory here. For documentation. So we'll just throw a file in here. I guess we'll just call it Buko ERD dot markdown. And so, oops. So essentially, like, I don't have a better title for it right now. Let's see, ER diagram. So I think what we'll do is we'll start. So the kind of concept I'm dancing around is that there's like some top level thing that a book is a part of, and that's a title or a work. I can't seem to decide whether I truly want it to be a title or a work. Nope. I thought I had... Oh, I think if I do... Nope. Thought I had something set up on my keyboard for caps lock. Not important, I suppose. Okay. So anyway, let's call it the work. So a work has many books, and I think if I do this, published as. So this terminology is going to take some work. I know that's not right. Let's well, that's definitely not right. Do we need to save it? What's going on here? What did I do wrong? Syntax is wrong here. I guess I need to we're going to play with that for a moment. I'm not required to capitalize. Oh, I see. Okay, so I'm not required to capitalize. So what is, I don't have any way to know what I'm doing. Do I, oh, you know what? Maybe I need to actually, so what is, probably overlooking something on why this isn't generating a chart. Maybe I need to add some more. Oh, okay. Well, that's, yep. There we go. Okay. That makes a lot more sense now. Oh, interesting. The capitalization ends up being significant in that sense. Okay. I kind of like that, actually. A work fills books. That's That's kind of interesting. All right, so what else do we have? So a work fills many books. The work is actually going to be so it's definitely going to have an ID. And it's definitely going to have a name. And those are the main things I know about it right now. A book is going to for sure have an ID. What is my relationship here? Team ID? That's not right. That's not quite right. So how do we do foreign keys? Relationship syntax. So yeah. See, this is where I actually like the mind map idea, because I can like literally point my things to other things. Well, this is okay. Let's fill in some more details on book. So so this is the ID itself is actually, it's not going to be a, well, this might not. So, okay. It's got to be alphanumeric because they might be alphanumeric. So it's not really a string, it's a varchar. I don't know if this needs something like a varchar. Maybe we could just call it string. I guess for purposes here, we'll just call it string. So this will be, this is where things get a little bit dicey from a domain modeling perspective. So book right now is going to fill from a single publisher or single press, but there will be more down the lane. And I talked about using slugs to include an identifier that makes it easy to identify who the press is. Now, to avoid issues, we might run into issues anyway, but to avoid most issues, we're going to allow our database to get a single ID automatically assigned when a book is created. So those will be the first IDs. Then there's that slug, which I have to think about how this may work. This may not actually be something persisted in the database. Well, friendly ID probably does persisted in the database. So, you know, maybe what we should just call it is the slug. And so that this essentially acts as the unique identifier from the press. Now, Easton Press, I know how theirs work. There's sort of two variants. One is a 4-digit identifier for individual works. They sort of use a numeric system, a loose numeric system that categorizes things. So like your science fiction would have one number, your literature will have another number, etc. But then they also have books that are in series. So series meaning publisher series. So, you know, masterpieces of science fiction, masterpieces of fantasy, greatest books ever written, right? So these are publisher series where they're cataloging or they're grouping a number of books together. Even though the books themselves are not necessarily related, the authors have nothing necessarily to do with each other, and so on and so forth. So generally speaking, we know it's going to be either a 4-digit number, in this case a string. They don't, you know, we don't need them to be numbers. The sorting by them is kind of a nice to have. But we may, I mean, numbers would still be alphabetical if it's a string. So we don't really need them to be integers. And I don't know how other publishers do them. I don't know if everyone uses numbers or if some people do alphanumerics. Regardless, what we're going to have on that is that prefix anyway, but that'll be handled by the code implementation, and that's not important for what we're calling this. But by calling it slug, I think that kind of gives us what we need, and that may be what the field ends up getting called in with the gem anyway. So I'm just trying to put all these identifiers at the front. It's not really necessary, but it's what I want anyway. So a lot of these, when they just say ID, they're going to be foreign references in our database. So they're going to point to keys. So you can presume that there's going to be the works table and it will have IDs. There will be the series is table and it will have IDs. So in my planning here, I have translator, artist, and author IDs, but I don't think I actually want this to be fields on a book, because what happens if you have two authors, two artists, two translators? Suddenly you can't just link an ID. So I think that's going to be a joins table. So books authors, books illustrators, books translators. Publisher is probably straightforward. There's probably, I'll probably kick myself later for saying this, but it's probably publisher or press. I'm going to call it press ID. I'm probably going to end up with it being press, because they're not, they're not really publishers, they're presses. Right? They're pressing other publishers' books, kind of. Works, really. Yeah. It's going to actually have a name. So it's going to have a copyright. And this is where things get so tricky from like a cataloging perspective. So it's going to have a copyright year. I guess that's a date or date time. We only want the year part of it, so we might think that through. But really what we're looking for is the pressing year, the publication year, right? So copyright year, books will have multiple copyright years. So this might need to turn into something slightly more complex than that. Maybe a table with arrays, or maybe it's just books copyright years, books copyrights. So how do we style that? Book copyright for lack of better terms, we'll just call it a has. Right, so well, it's not going to be book copyrights. Yeah, and this is the dicey bit. Is it really the book or is it the work? Probably the book, because like one press will have its own, might have its own copyrights. So like if they do custom typesetting, custom artwork, custom whatever, they probably get their own copyrights for that edition. I got to think through, can we name these tables book copyrights? Does that make sense, or does it have to be books copyrights? I need to look into that. But pretty straightforward. It's going to have its own ID. And it's going to have a book ID. Yeah, so let's maybe do some variance here and show some of this is also me learning Mermaid. So this is not quite right. Let's switch this around and say that a press, right? It's probably a press and not a publisher is what we want to call it. And I don't know if I'm getting this syntax right. So a press book prints. Right, so a press prints many books, and and press prints many works. This is why I like working with Mermaid. Look at that. That's strange, but it works. Let's just generate an author table here. I don't know if these need to be organized in any special way. With Mermaid or not. So yeah. And similarly, so I'm trying to figure this out. These things are definitely going to be connected, interconnected. And by the time we're done with this, it's going to be a pretty big mix of stuff. So they're going to have a name, the author, but I think they're also going to have like, and this will probably be is that a valid? So they're also going to have aliases, right? Because, you know, sometimes they're known by different names. Sometimes they drop a vowel, drop an initial or add an initial, or choose not to initialize a name, but spell it out. So we'll think about how we do that later. So this is sort of like the other reason why we're doing this is because the more clarity that we have here, the easier it will be in the next phase for us to take this information, and when we're satisfied that we can start creating the book model, we can also take this information and start writing tests and translate these into tests. You know, some pretty basic tests, right? And our tests are going to be to test our implementation, not Rails, not the gems, etc., but, you know, the components of it, right? Because we're going to specify like which of these fields are necessary, and so forth. But by kind of knowing a lot of this stuff, it in theory will make it easier for us to translate it into actual tests. So this is, I think I'm going to stop here, wrap it up, because this was really just meant to be a test of streaming. We'll see if I've done this in a way that the video on demand will be available after the fact. And if so, thanks for watching, And if it's not available, well, then so be it. Maybe one person accidentally tuned in because this was pushed in front of them or something. But yeah, I think I'm going to wrap it up here. I'm probably going to do more of this offline. If you do catch the video on demand of this and you want to see this planning stuff online, let me know. I'll stream it instead of doing it offline, but I'm probably going to fill in a lot of these details offline, taking that mind map and turning it into a proper ERD or somewhat proper. And there are gems that we can use and that I've used to generate these after the fact. And it's pretty nice because it tells you, like, what I'm doing now is what I plan to do. But if I don't implement it correctly, which my test should tell me, but if I don't implement it correctly, it may actually vary from what I'm planning. And so I might even use one of those gems later anyway, just to generate it from what we have. A lot of database GUIs actually will do ERDs for you. But there's also gems that will do it from your, from your schema. So we're doing it ourselves beforehand because I want to tease out a lot of these like ideas. And right now I'm just trying to do them all as like has many relationships, but there's going to be different relationships here that I'm going to have to model in the ERD. But yeah, I don't know. And some of this is just a test of Mermaid to see how it lays stuff out. It does a pretty good job. It's pretty interesting. So yeah, well, by the next stream, I'm going to try to stream most of my work on this application, or at least like blocks of it. Maybe like some things I'll start on stream and then finish offline. We'll see how that goes, and whether there's feedback if people want to see all of that. Probably this is only helpful for very beginners, if even helpful for beginners. That's not really the goal of this, right? See my other series, my Let's Code Exorcism series, if you actually want information on learning Ruby. This is just sort of like, this project is for me. That's who it's for. But I'm recording it and putting it out there in case it's at all helpful. Even just like as background watching, maybe. Certainly, I like to see some other people building apps, right? If we get some viewers and have some feedback, we can talk about stuff as it's getting built. But yeah, no, this is just kind of a personal project. So, all right. Hopefully by the next time I broadcast or publish anything, this will be filled out a lot more in depth, and we can go from there and actually get into writing some code. Cool. All right. Goodbye. But as I'm heading out, remember, there's gold in them there rubies.